Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Getting Started with Mason Bees on this Thursday evening. My name is Taren Urquhart. I am the Arts and Special Programmer here at the West Vancouver Memorial Library. I wish we were doing this in person, but this is the next best thing, just me and a whole lot of Mason Bees in the technology lab in the basement. So I wanted to tell you a bit about myself, and thank you so much for telling me who's joining me and from where. Lots of people from North and West Vancouver, Gambier Island. So excited to tell you all things Mason Bees and why I love them so much. So like I mentioned, I look after the arts and music programs here at the library, but I am also known as the Crazy Bug Lady. And in the past, I have been teaching mainly youth about Mason bees, and we have a lovely Mason bee tree on our story house balcony, which you are welcome to come and see anytime. It'll start getting very active in the next few weeks. But this is the first time that I'm presenting an adult lecture, and I have exciting things to tell you near the end about my bee house lending program and bee house lending program and cocoons. So another thing, a little background about myself. I have been raising Mason bees for about 25 years now. It started with my dad and I. Now my mom is fully into the process. In fact, she was cleaning cocoons today. She just texted to tell me that the males are starting to hatch while she's cleaning. So I said, Mom, start cleaning faster. So 25 years experience doing this and teaching kids around the community. I am not an entomologist. I have a fine art history background, but I have learned a lot and I've read a lot and I try to keep current. So let's start. So a little overview for tonight. We've gotten the welcome out of the way. We're going to cover some fun facts about bees. We're going to go through how to identify a Mason bee, because they're going to be a lot of fun to play with your houses and watch. We spend hours just having a cup of tea on the deck and watching them fly. It's very therapeutic. We're going to go over their nesting habitats, because it's an integral part of rearing them in a house, their life cycle. I'm going to briefly touch on some of the common pests that you may encounter. And then we're going to dive into houses, the best houses, and other things that bees need to thrive in your backyard. I'm going to tell you more about the library bee bungalow lending program and cocoons. We're going to have a short Q&A, and then we're going to, if there's time, open some tubes and look at some cocoons. And then if people want to stay around, hang around, we'll do a further Q&A at the end until we run out of time or there's no more questions. So that's tonight. Thank you again for joining me on this journey into Mason bee land. Now I'm going to digress just shortly at the beginning here and get this out of the way, because I'm guessing that many of you in the audience are like myself. We're nature lovers, we're gardeners, we're insect lovers. And if you have friends like me and they know how much you love nature, they probably send you pictures of these creatures that pop up in the news. And they concern me a lot. I love a story about a bee, but it's mainly the honeybees and that horrible one in the top right corner, that murder hornet that have been so prevalent in the media of recent years. And no wonder, we love the honeybee and what it does for it. It makes honey. It is a fabulous pollinator. But the media knows this, and they know it's an instant hit for us. But what I want to do, and don't get me wrong, honeybees are extremely important. They're dealing with a lot of their own issues. Pesticide use is rampant. We're mismanaging the honeybee in some respects. It's dealing with climate change and disruption and loss of habitat. But I think it's important to try and pull away from the honeybee and some of the perils it is in and focus on these same perils that are happening to our native pollinators. And I want to change the focus tonight away from the media darlings that are the honeybee and really focus on native pollinators, including the mason bee. And just briefly to remind us all that 90% of flowering plants can't reproduce without the help of pollinators. Many of them are things we don't think about: beetles, flies, hummingbirds, bats. And the diversity of these native pollinators make them less susceptible to threats like disease, because we aren't mismanaging them and moving around the country from almonds to watermelons on trucks and whatnot. They are handling threats much better than the honeybees. The best way to promote native pollinator population is to provide safe and clean habitat. That's why we're all here tonight. And a lot of the past agricultural practices are now seeing the benefit of native pollinators and how strong they are. And they're trying to integrate them into some of their crop rotations. So in fact, almonds are now integrating mason bees in with the honeybees. I just listened to a webinar the other night, and they're having great success. So tonight, again, you're joining me on this journey. We're going to stay in it together for a year. I'm here to answer all your questions, and we're going to share stories for the next year. And I really love you to commit to caring for our native bees in our backyard and really helping them out in the best way possible, providing them with safe, clean housing. And what better thing to do during COVID than take slow-mo videos of your mason bees? These are my mason bees on our back deck in slow-mo. They do not fly this slow. And they are just having a lovely time one beautiful spring day. So like I said, I have been raising these guys in my backyard for 25 years, but my journey started with, believe it or not, one hole. And this is the hole on our back deck, which surprisingly was filled again this year. So we're waiting for the little guys to start coming out. And after 20 odd years, this is what our back deck now looks like. Quite a few holes. I think we are washing cocoons right now, and my mom says we're at about 600 cocoons, so we're having a good year. And then what I also do is I start roping in my friends. This is a good friend of mine, Inland Valley, Pat, and she now raises bees. I also have everyone at the library raising bees. So welcome to my craziness. A few reasons why I love mason bees. They are native to British Columbia, which means they are very attuned to our climate. And I just love working with an insect that is, its home is the Pacific Northwest. I'll remind you that honeybees are a European species and were brought over with, came with the explorers as they came to the New World. They're easy to attract to your backyard. Often all you have to do is put up the house. It's true what they say, if you build it, they will come. They're great fun to watch with kids. They don't disrupt pets. In fact, Sandra's cat just ate 2 of them the other day. And they're very gentle, non-aggressive. They don't sting. This is in contention on some websites, but I have never been stung. I have been nipped by one similar to a mosquito bite. But again, very, very gentle. Bees, and so tonight we're going to talk first about the extreme diversity of bees on this planet. As you can see on the right, they come in all shapes and sizes and colors. They're on every continent. This is one of my favorite bee books, The Bees in Your Backyard. Our library has it if you're at all interested in taking it out. A wealth of knowledge in this book. Fabulous. And as you can see, bees are not just the honeybee. There are over 20,000 species worldwide, over 4,000 species in North America, upwards of 500 to 600 species in British Columbia alone, and still counting. We're discovering them each day. And surprisingly, most are solitary, and of those solitary, they live in the ground, something a lot of people don't realize. I'm just gonna briefly touch on the different types of bees, and then we'll get right into mason bees. There's three main categories of bees in the world: social, parasitic, and solitary, the one we're speaking mainly about this evening. Of the three, 10% are social, and most of us know these. The honeybees and the bumblebees are the two most well-known. They work in hive complexes with one main queen. They often will defend the hive, and that is the job of the workers. The queen is the egg layer. She does all the egg laying. All the workers no longer need their ovipositors. So their ovipositor who lays the egg has now been turned into a stinger. And that is something unique to social insects. 25% of bees are actually parasitic. You may have heard the word cuckoo bees or kleptoparasites. The one on the left is a cuckoo bee to the leafcutter, and the one on the right is a nomada, and there's little red ones around North Vancouver, and they love to parasitize ground nesting bees. Just like the name suggests, cuckoo bees, they have discovered a way to use someone else's provisions and kind of life cycle, and they needle in there and lay their own egg within the provision cell, and their offspring feeds on it instead of the intended baby. Of the 65% that remain of bees that are solitary, 42%, like I mentioned, mass majority of them are below ground solitary insects. Solitary meaning they do not work in a hive social setting. One queen does all of her own work. They often like to aggregate together. You'll find many mining bees, for example, in one area, but they do not work in tandem. She creates her own tunnel. And to the left here is a picture of a mining bee. They can create quite elaborate tunnels. They'll dig way, way down into kind of sandy soil and then create little chambers, which they provision with food and lay their offspring. And then there are the ones we're going to be talking about tonight, the solitary above ground dwelling insects. And almost all of them require a pre-existing cavity. They are not a destructive insect. To the left, this bee, I believe it's in the UK, has found a snail shell that it's going to use, again, pre-existing cavity. And the one on the left is a little bee that is pushing through the pith of some sort of raspberry stalk, and she will lay her offspring in the pithy center. And along with, obviously, these above ground nesters are our mason bees, and some of you may have heard of leafcutter bees, and that is in this collection. So the mason bee shares a solitary bee lifestyle with all these others I spoke of. And like I said, there's no cooperation like a social insect. There is no honey made. There is no hive complex. They use pre-existing cavities, or they dig their own tunnel in the ground. She is her own queen and provisions her own cells with food. These adult life cycles are quite short-lived, only 1 or 2 generations per year, and they only fly for a short time, which we'll learn more about the mason bee. They are not migratory. They do not travel vast distances. Honeybees can go kilometers from their hive. They still stay very close to home. So once you have a mason bee colony in your neighborhood, they're not going to go far as long as you provide them with the resources they need. And they are not domesticated. We are managing and manipulating them a bit, but they are not domesticated to the extent of the honeybee. So let's get to know the mason bee a little further. This is a beautiful photograph of a mason bee, I think from the Idaho Bee Lab. Just love it. So mason bees are small blue-black with an iridescent sheen. Oh, look. They are often mistaken as flies. In fact, a lot of my friends or my community members, they all think they're small flies flying around. They are built for pollination and are often referred to as hairy belly bees. You'll notice all of these hairs on her lower abdomen, also referred to as her scopa. Honeybees have their scopa on their legs. They are very clean, non-messy pollinators, but mason bees, this pollen just falls on and off of their hairy belly, which makes them excellent at pollinating crops, especially fruit trees. They are an early spring pollinator, and they are active at much lower temperatures. I said before that being native, they're much more attuned to our climate. And it's true, mason bees, you'll see them flying in rainy weather. You'll see them flying early in the morning until after sunset. Honeybees are not as rigorous when it comes to working, and they'll often be in the hive just hanging out. But these guys are workhorses. And you're going to start seeing them flying from mid-March until late May, sometimes into June, depending on our weather in the Pacific Northwest. Also, oh, I just see someone in chat. I can't hear you, join audio. Sorry, can't help them. Carrying on. Anyone joining us from elsewhere in the province, your temperatures may change when your mason bees come out. So I'm very interested to hear how your timelines are going to progress. This is the male mason bee. The male is smaller and has extremely long antennae. And you'll notice that it has a very bushy kind of front of its head. When I'm teaching kids, I often like to do this and tell them that it is reminiscent of a little mustache. The females are larger, and they have these large mandibles at the front, which can look rather menacing, but is really to help them manipulate the mud. And this is where the name mason bee comes from. They use mud to build partitions in their tubes, and thus need this device to manipulate the mud. On the right here is a picture I took, I think last spring. The mason bee, the male mason bee is on top. He has the long antenna. You can see that bushy mustache at the front, a little mohawk. And then the female is below. She is larger, quite a bigger abdomen and the shorter antenna. Now we're just going to dive into the life cycle of the mason bee. Starting with number 1, the males emerge first after several days of 13-degree weather. I like to tell people it's what I call the cherry tree cue. Once you see cherry trees in Vancouver start to bloom, you know mason bees are not far behind. And like I told you earlier, the males are starting to hatch. And the females will emerge about 2 weeks later. The males hang around, mating occurs. Often in front of my houses, there's a mad dash. You'll find everyone will drop to the ground and there'll be like 3 males piled on top of one poor female. I don't know how she handles it, but she gets through it. The male's life is rather short-lived. After this ruckus in the first week or so, you'll no longer see males. They're very short lifespan. They are used and discarded. Way to go, nature. The females then go about choosing a nesting cavity. We think she marks it with a scent, not absolutely sure, but females seem to know which cavities are their own. Occasionally they'll go in the wrong one and there'll be a little tussle, but for the most part, they know exactly which nesting cavity is there. They prefer holes 6 to 8 millimeters wide or 5/16 of an inch, give or take. And they begin provisioning the tube with a mixture of nectar and pollen. Some people refer to this little provision as bee butter or bee bread. And it looks like a little yellow mass. They will visit 75 to 150 flowers per day, gathering the pollen on their scopa and their hairy bellies and bringing it back to their cavity. And I have an excellent video that I'll show you in just a moment that shows amazing footage of this happening. She will back in to the provision that's in the tube, and she will lay 1 egg on the food source. And then to protect this developing baby, she will create a protective wall. And it's all with mud, and thus the name mason bee. She will lay 15 eggs in her lifetime, averaging about 5 offspring per tube if the tube is of a good length. And what's absolutely fascinating about this life cycle is that she can choose the sex of her offspring when laying. And here is a picture of cross-section of a tube. And you can see at the far right, she's created a mud wall. She has provisioned it with quite a large provision. You'll notice it's larger than this one at the front. She has laid an egg, and then she has created a mud wall. And she continues to do this until either the end of her life or until something happens. A bird eats her, you know, whatever happens. So she creates another lump of bee bread, egg, wall, bee bread, egg wall until the end. And then she caps the very end. Now, I know I said previous that the provision on the right is much larger than the provision on the left. That being, she has laid a female egg at the very back, most likely another female in the middle, and then this one is the very front is most likely a male. This is due, firstly, if there is a predator or something that comes in at the front, the male is going to be eaten first. They are somewhat disposable. Sorry, guys out there. The other reason is that the males always emerge first, so thus they must be at the front. But just a fascinating a life cycle. We'll also see pictures of cocoons in a bit. The female cocoon is always larger than the male, and that's one way you can tell the difference. So I've got just a short little clip here of a movie, and enjoy.
This season, our female red mason bee has also been building her nest in hollow tubes. However, unlike the leafcutter bee, she constructs hers out of mud. If you keep a keen eye out in spring, you might very well see red mason bees like these, mining for mud. They will often return to the same location each time they need to collect more material, making an average of 8 trips to build a single cell. Once each cell is constructed, she must then fill it, because in addition to providing her offspring with a place to live, she must also provide them with enough food to last them until adulthood. For solitary bees, this means visiting flowers to collect nectar and pollen in great abundance. Red mason bees are highly efficient pollinators. A single female is thought to do the work of 60 honeybees. This is believed to be a result of how their bodies are adapted to carrying large amounts of pollen. Underneath their abdomen, they have a special organ called a scopa, a collection of stiff hairs that they load to the limit. Yet, despite this remarkable carrying capacity, it may still take her an entire day to fill just a single cell. She regurgitates nectar from her crop, which will supply her young with essential sugars for energy. The pollen she has collected will provide her young with protein for growth. This mixture is commonly known as bee butter. What took her an hour to collect is offloaded in a few seconds. And she is immediately off for more.
I absolutely love that footage. I've never seen anything like her backing up. Well, first regurgitating the nectar, absolutely fascinating. And then backing up and scraping the pollen off of her scopa, mesmerizing. I know you guys are probably all thinking I'm nuts, but I think it is just the best. Okay, carried on. Her life is going to end around mid-May to June. Like I said, very short-lived, 6-week lifespan. Early spring pollinator. Will not see them in the warmer months of summer. However, your houses may attract other insects. We're not going to touch on them, but there are cavity nesting bees, berry bees, sweat bees, not sweat bees, but berry bees, little wasps that use resin that may find your house. So that could be exciting, and we can talk about it when we clean our houses in the future. The egg is going to hatch, and it's going to hatch into a larva and begin feeding on the food provision for 10 days. Once it has eaten the food source, it will begin to spin a protective silk cocoon and will pupate within that cocoon. And this is a picture just showing the life cycle from egg to larva, eating down the provisions. These little dots that you can see, the larva is pooping. Those are frass. And usually stays outside of the cocoon. So when we open the tube, you'll see a lot of their poop. And then the cocoon starts to get a darker color, but you can actually see the silk that it has spun. Absolutely fascinating. And then to just finish off the life cycle, there's a fully formed adult bee in its protective cocoon by summer's end, October-ish. This is when they enter a diapause or a hibernation or cold phase. And it's essential that they enter this cold phase. If they don't, some of their developmental properties will not occur. Their wing buds and a few things can go wrong, and they won't hatch properly in the spring. They're going to overwinter in this tube until next year's cherry tree queue. So until next March. Won't see them until next March. Like I mentioned, here is a picture of the fully formed cocoons on the bottom. Hard to tell the sizes, but trust me, some are larger, which are female, and some are smaller, which are male. And just for fun, I found this on YouTube. We'll see if it's going to play. And this is what I do at home after I wash all my cocoons, and we'll get into this further in a moment. All of the females are starting to chew out. Many of the males look like they already have. I don't know if you can hear the chewing. I can on my earphones. And they're just so fun to watch when they do this. And oh, and she's out and she's off. Pew! I'm just briefly going to touch on a few pests that you might encounter while raising your mason bees. This is something, if you join me in the project and take out a home that you might encounter. I don't want any of these pests to dissuade you from raising mason bees. I just want you to be aware that we have to be vigilant and look after our bees because they do have a few things up against them, as all things do in nature. So pollen mites are probably the biggest problem. They pick these up from flowers and they transport them from flower to flower. The mites don't hurt the developing young, but it does compete for its food source. And you can see on the right, this is a mass of pollen, and a mite has started to reproduce, or many mites have started to reproduce, and they've just taken over the food source and the egg has gotten lost in there. They're very small indeed, about the size of a period on the end of a sentence. And another reason we want to learn how to wash and care for these bees is that if we don't look after the tube and do some maintenance at year's end, the little baby bee will have to climb through all this debris. And often by the time he and she gets to the end, she is so laden with mites, like this little guy at the top left corner here, he can't fly because he is just covered with pollen mites. And I have tried to remove them with toothpicks, and it's not easy, let me tell you. 3 other things that we encounter are the chalcid wasp. I hate the chalcid wasp. It's very tiny, and it will lay its offspring. It is a kleptoparasite, and it will enter the tube and lay its offspring on the food source. Something that has recently shown up in the Pacific Northwest from Europe is the Houdini fly. We were decimated by this little critter 2 years ago, but my mom had great glee in feeding all of the Houdini fly larvae to our birds. And this year we did very well, very few Houdini flies. And occasionally we encounter the carpet beetle, which I've never seen them enter, but they obviously have because we find their larvae inside the tubes. Again, I don't want these guys to dissuade you from rearing them. They're manageable, and we can, if you ever encounter them, we can talk about ways to mitigate it. The Houdini fly, if you see them flying around the houses, they're fun to squish. So now we're going to talk about what mason bees need to thrive, and this is where we come in. Oh, and I can hit play because this is a video. A little hard to see, but this was a very warm spring day, and I thought it would be fun to take a picture of all my ladies flying. As you can see, not at all interested in me, just interested at the task at hand, which is laying eggs, provisioning cavities. And we have pets that walk on the deck, no problem. And we have our tea watch the bees. So first thing to allow mason bees to thrive is to provide them with food, pollen and nectar from early blooming flowers. Not absolutely necessary to run out to the garden store tomorrow and purchase flowers, because luckily, North and West Van District loves to plant native early spring pollinating plants. On the far right, Oregon grape or barberry, it's everywhere. It's their favorite shrub. Another big favorite is lily of the valley or Pieris japonica in the middle. And the picture to the left, I believe, is a laurel bush. This happens to be growing in the back fire alley of the library. And I have seen bees covering it. And this is just a snippet of what native pollinators love to eat. Flowering currant, common camas, is one they absolutely love, and lupins. And I'll remind you that bees prefer white, yellow, or blue flowers. They see in a different range of colors than we do. The birds, such as hummingbirds, really love bright oranges and reds, but insects and bees in particular love these whites, blues, yellows. So if you're out buying plants, keep that in mind. Another thing I often like to do is go to a really good nursery and just watch and see who is landing on what. Oh, and someone has just said, thank you, Jane, it is a cherry laurel. I had an idea it was. Oh, it's an invasive form of laurel. Interesting. So I have some excellent resources when it comes to plants, which I will send out to everyone tomorrow in an email. Xerces Society is my go-to place for all things pollinator conservation. And they have an excellent native plant list for British Columbia. Another great place to go is the Pollinator Partnership. They have eco-regional planting guides for all of BC. I will also send you a link to that. So many plants you can choose from. It's just important that they are blooming, have nectar resources. Oh, and I should mention, these bees are incredible at finding pollen and nectar in places we haven't even thought about. So while it's important to provide them with food, it is not the absolute top of your list. The house is much more important in where you place it, and we'll get to that in one moment. I've included this slide, and it's a bit controversial because some people believe you need to supply mason bees with mud. Here in North and West Vancouver and all of our rain, I have never, in my 20 years, provided them with a mud source. They can find it. They like to choose their moisture content. Whatever she likes, she will find it, and we have ample mud. But maybe if you're in the interior, Thompson Nicola, up in Merritt, they may need a mud source. So as long as it's a clay and soil-based medium, not so sandy, you could just provide them with a bucket and water it occasionally. You'll actually see the bees enter the bucket and choose the moisture content they want and fly away with it. I've seen certain nature stores sell bags of mason bee clay. I don't know about those. I think you can get by with just making your own slurry, but that's just my 2 cents. And isn't that a great picture of her on the right, just holding a mud chunk in her mandibles? So good. Okay, so now housing, which is probably one of the reasons you've joined me tonight, because there are a myriad of housing options. There is masonry blocks. There are green tubes with like weird psychedelic things on the side that are supposed to attract them. There's tubes, there's trays, and you may have seen a lot of these. I am going to tell you what I have found works best for me. By all means, try a variety, but you may be able to learn from my mistakes. So one thing all of these housing options have in common is that it is a pre-existing cavity with a sealed end. She really prefers a sealed end, so she knows, one, that there's no parasitic wasps or anything that's going to enter through the back door, and she doesn't have to build one more mud wall at the end. Sometimes she does anyway. I don't know why, but if we can provide that, it'll save her a bit of time and energy. All of these have a hole size or a surface area hole size of 6 to 8 millimeters or 5/16 of an inch. You'll notice on the right there, the tray method, their holes are more square. They seem to go into those. It's not a method I use, mainly because I don't find the joint or the tightness between the trays is tight enough, and those little parasitic wasps can wriggle through the smallest crack. So the tray is just not one that I've worked with. Another thing these all have in common is the tube length is 4 inches in length or more. We'll talk a bit more about that in 1 sec. I'm going to start by telling you what I don't recommend. On the left here, someone's gone crazy with some drill bits and some wood. In the past, I have told people, you know, if you just want to have fun with the bees, go crazy with some drill bits. You'll probably entice some mason bees and maybe some of the later pollinating bees that I spoke about. But I've changed my mind. I think it's important to provide them with the cleanest habitat, and it's really important to provide a liner. We'll talk a bit about that in a sec. The 2 houses on the right, you may have seen at Costco or in nature stores like Canada Tire. These are not optimal. One, the length of the tube is not great. The one in the middle, I actually did buy one for an experiment to see how it did. It's now up at our cabin in the Shuswap. Some things go into it, mainly little solitary wasps that love to pick caterpillars off of plants. But the length, again, is not a good depth, and they're very hard to clean. The bamboo is stuck in there. You can't get it out, and they're very hard to crack open. You'll also notice some of the widths of those bamboo pieces are ridiculously large. I don't know what insect would go in there. So not the best choice. And the one on the far right, again, the depth is just not optimal. And Jane, I'll get to the optimal length in just one sec. You're just such a king. So big red line through these, not a super fan. So first housing option, I'm going to give you three, is the wood block with drilled holes in it. This is where Dad and I started. And when I said Dad and I mean Dad. Dad makes all the houses for our family. The pros of this, it's a great place to start. It's inexpensive. You can use leftover fence posts. You can roll your own paper straws and insert them. One of the cons is that these love to wick moisture. And you can see that the little roof they've provided on top, it is not adequately protecting those holes. And Jane, to answer your optimum length question, you'll notice this is probably a 4x4 fence post. So you're only getting a 4-inch tube length. You're going to run into problems if you have a drill bit or a drill press that cannot exceed 4 inches. So 4 inches will get you by, but our optimum length is 6 inches, and that's where the tubes come in. So like I said, this is a great starter house, but I have better suggestions. Next option is some sort of frame or wood block with a cardboard tube and a paper liner. I also have examples of all of this that I'll show you in a moment with a camera. Some of the pros of this method, they're good value. The straws aren't too expensive and they're a good length. The house at the back, I just grabbed this picture off of Amazon, and they're providing a tube length of a nice 6 inches. And to reiterate, we want this length of tube to provide the best ratio of females to males laying for the queen bee or the female bee each year. If she's provided with a very short tube, she's only going to lay a male, which is fine, but the male is not going to add to the population for us the following year. So we want to provide her with 4 inches or more, and she will give the best ratio of females tucked safely at the back and males at the front. Hope that answers that question. Anything longer than 4 inches is perfect. Cons to this housing option, especially the one to the left, is that those parasitic wasps I mentioned can really niggle in between the spaces between the straws, and that ovipositor can go through anything. So this one is easily parasitized. The other picture with, you'll notice that the cardboard tube is within a wood medium. This is a system that I have used before, and that's the one I'd go with. But you still have problems with moisture, especially here in North and West Vancouver. Just a little bit of rain gets on the front of that house. Those cardboard tubes suck and wick the moisture right in to the house. And Kathy say, so which house do you use? I'm almost there, Kathy. So this one is not a bad option. Good value, good length, good place to start. But this is the Cadillac of Mason bee houses. And this is one that I've just recently started to use. And it's using natural grass reeds. I will also give you links to suppliers on where to purchase all of these products. The pros to using this natural grass reed is it comes in varying widths. They average 6 to 8 millimeters, but research is finding that the females like to choose the size of hole that she likes the best. Being a natural fiber, the air exchange is really natural, and no moisture builds up. And sometimes if it gets too humid in the tube, moisture builds up and the offsprings sweat and rot. But the grass reeds are good at preventing this. The reeds are also impervious to moisture, so they're not going to have any trouble wicking that water if your house touches the rain. And they have an extremely thick wall, much thicker than the cardboard, and they're getting research is showing less parasitism by this little wasp. So this is the house version that we are using in our lending house program. And we're going to open some tubes in a moment. Some of the cons of using grass reeds is they are a bit more expensive, 50 cents a tube, and you can't reuse them. But I can show you how to clean them in the future, and we can keep our baby bees nice and clean. If you're using the paper tubes, you're looking at a price of anywhere from 10 cents to 25 cents for a paper tube. Another key thing after food and mud and how you're going to choose your nesting material is placement of the house. And this is somewhere where people I've worked with before, this is when they were doing so well and then it stopped succeeding. So important things to remember. The house must be stationary. It can't swing in the breeze. I often see do-it-yourself houses on the internet and they're swinging on a string. No, the bee definitely wants it to be stationary. She wants to ensure that her egg does not fall off its food provision. Early morning sun is preferred, or sun or partial sun at some time during the day. The picture of all of our houses on our back deck, it works extremely well for us. We use the paper tube method, but they are under the eaves and under a full kind of glass enclosure. So they're receiving no rain whatsoever. There's a bit of an overhang, so they do get some early morning sun, and then they don't get baked during the heat of the day. So early morning sun is preferred, or sun at some time of the day, preferably out of the shade. A lot of people think, oh, I'll stick it on a tree, or I'll stick it right in the middle of my garden. Strangely enough, mason bees look to man-made objects for their housing. They must have learned that they can find crevices and little holes, little cricks in man-made objects. They love shingles. They love little holes at the bottom, windows. I've heard stories of them in electrical outlets and audio ports of stereos and teapot spigots. We had one entering a hole at the bottom of our chair, our deck chairs. Like, they will find holes anywhere. So, but they, strangely enough, do not look at trees, and they aren't a fan of a house just sitting on a post in the middle of a garden space. If those are your only options, or you have a fence somewhere, go for it. But if you can find a man-made object with an overhang that gets morning sun, I know these are not always the easiest things to find in your space, but that is what's going to give you success. If you don't have one of these things, I really think it's that sun factor. If I was going to choose any one thing, they need that sun to warm up in the morning, and that's going to give you the most success. And I just wanted to pop in a picture of our bee tree that's on our story house balcony here at the library. As you can see, it only receives morning sun and then it's in shade for most of the day, but we've had great success rearing bees on the story house balcony. And again, I invite you, if you're in the library, especially in April, come on up. It's on the upper level of the youth level at the library, and take a look at the bees flying. Just to continue with placement, I think I've gotten it through to you all that protection from the wind and rain is very important. If you are on a rainy wall, make sure there is ample protection from the rain. I love the picture at the top here because that is one scoop and roof. That's a reed method. And that house looks like it's going to do quite well. I just finished saying don't put a house in a tree, but this was a great use of a plastic pipe. Lots of protection there. And some people have asked me, what if your house is near a bird feeder? All of our houses on our back deck are near several bird feeders, both seed feeders and hummingbirds. We don't have a problem with them interacting. If for some reason you did, you could make a wire guard to put on the front of your house. You can also purchase them. If anyone is joining us tonight and is in an apartment, I don't recommend trying bee houses if you're any higher than the 3rd floor, or if you're on a shady side of a building. You must receive sun at some part of the day. And to keep them on your floor, I would suggest providing them with some blooming flowers. Bees are not known usually to fly higher than the 3rd floor because they just know there are no resources up there. So, and I encourage you to be creative. If you aren't able to borrow one of our houses and don't live in the Lower Mainland, here are just some ideas. On the left here, someone has used some plumbing pipe. I'm not crazy about the black color because I think that would heat up quite quickly. So I would probably tell them to maybe use a white PVC pipe, but I like the creative factor. The top middle picture is reeds in a coffee can. Not a bad idea. I'd worry about some water maybe gathering beneath the lip of that coffee can. So maybe drill a few holes there. And the can is probably going to rust, but probably not going to hurt the babies. The middle bottom one, I like that. Lots of rain protection. That looks good to me. And then just wanted to mention that a lot of people in the district are pulling their raspberry canes and other kind of pithy stems. By all means, if you have those at your disposal, cut some lengths of them and put them in a can and see if any little bees show up. So I just wanted to take a moment and talk about purchasing cocoons, either at a nature store or online. Most people in the Lower Mainland or on Vancouver Island aren't going to have any trouble attracting mason bees. Like the old adage says, if you build it, they will come. And if you borrow one of our library lending mason bee houses, you will have a small container filled with cocoons. So you'll be all ready, and all you have to do is put up the house and you are ready to go. But if you've had trouble in the past attracting mason bees, or you just want to, experiment with purchasing some cocoons, they're available, as I said, in nature stores or online. They come in a box or small container similar to the one you see on the screen. They usually have exit holes punched in the side, sometimes covered with a little piece of tape. And you affix these to the side of your mason bee house, either with a piece of tape or an elastic band. Keep in mind that you want to try and keep this box or container dry and out of the sun, the heat of the sun. One year, when I was quite new to mason bees quite a while ago, I thought, oh, I'll expose them to the sun. They'll get warmed up and get going and chew out of their cocoons and everything will be great. but I ended up frying them in the heat of the sun, and I lost most of my brood that year. So I did not do that again, but you experiment and you try things and you learn. Someone also asked recently, they had heard from a employee at a nature store as they were purchasing several cocoons. The employee said, keep the box in your fridge until the temperatures reach about 13 degrees for several days, and then it's time to put your box out. And I thought about this for a while, going, why would the employee say this? Because I do have some concerns about putting mason bees in your fridge. And I think the reason being, if you ever hear this from someone, is that they want to ensure that your mason bee males hatch close to your females. And if you only have 10 or so cocoons at your disposal, this makes perfect sense. So I very much like this reasoning. Hold your cocoons back in the fridge until the 13 degrees or the cherry tree queue. But I don't suggest keeping bees in the fridge for too long. I do get a little concerned about humidity levels. So I'm going to suggest several days, a couple of weeks is okay, but beyond that, I'd say stay away from that. I also just briefly want to mention cocoon boxes that you may see online. They often they're either made out of styrofoam and have kind of two little separations, one with kind of a moisture wicking material that you put water on. These are mainly used to store cocoons over the winter, or for people that have cocoons and they want to hold them back so they release the bees during a specific fruit, a special blooming time to enable huge fruit set on certain trees, cherry trees, apples, whatnot. So I just wanted to mention these. I will be telling you later in the year how to go about protecting your house during the winter, washing the cocoons. So this isn't a method I usually go to. The idea of me having to worry about moisture content in my fridge and just the worry of my little cocoons turning into raisins over the winter, not ideal. So again, more information to come to everyone as we progress through the year and into October and over the winter. So I know this has been a lot of information near the end of the presentation. We've gone from food to mud sources to placement to different types of nesting materials. So I just wanted to conclude with kind of the top tips of this last section, the Coles notes, if you will. So if I was to choose one important factor for placing your house anywhere, I would say first priority is find somewhere where they get sun. I want to remind you of what my back deck looks like. We are tucked under the eaves, but the whole bottom 2 rows actually receive sun for the entire day, from the early morning through the heat of the noonday and then right into the evening. So I may have said earlier that you may want to try and keep it out of the heat of the day, but here in BC, that's not one of the factors I'm too worried about. I would love to see your houses get a south or southeast exposure for early morning sun. Second priority to me would be protection from the rain, whether you can, tuck it under an eaves or, get creative, maybe have an umbrella or just anything. Try and stay away from real shade of trees and branches. A reminder that if you're using paper or cardboard tubes, I have found that get them right out of the rain. The less moisture they have, the less wicking those tubes will just wick the moisture right into the house. And remember that the natural reeds that the little library lending houses are made out of can handle the weather. So if you have one of those or are going to experiment with some by ordering them, those can handle the weather. Those don't need to be out of the rain, just the sun. And then one final thing that I haven't mentioned yet is start a bee journal. I think mine goes back about 6 years. I hit myself sometimes saying, why didn't you start it sooner? But it goes back at least 6 years. And it's so fascinating to go back and see when my bees started hatching. It's a great resource. I have mine right here. And let's just go back. Last year, my first males started hatching March 25th to 29th. And in 2020, my males started hatching March 29th. And let's go one more, 2019. My first male, about 20 of them happened March 19th. So great information to have. I also write down what kind of weather we were having, and when the last female I see at the end of the year or the season. So that is the main lecture for tonight. I wanted to speak briefly about the Mason Bee Bungalow Lending Program that we have going on here at the library. If you choose to take one out, it is a 1-year commitment because I would very much like you to return the bee house next February and join me for a cocoon washing demonstration, because I am positive that you will all have success with cocoons leaving the house, or the bees hatching out of the cocoons and coming back to your house. We will cover some of the pests you might encounter, look at some of the parasites that you might find, look at some of the pollen mites as we open the tubes, and we can all talk about this, and fingers crossed, hopefully it will be an in-person program. And we can also talk about some of the different bees that may have used your house other than the mason bee. You might have a carder bee or a resin bee or a leaf cutter bee, and we can investigate that together. After we wash the cocoons next February, you are welcome to donate the cocoons back to us. If you had fun for a year and it was a great experiment, but you're thinking it's not a thing for you, you can donate the cocoons back to me. Or you are welcome to take the cocoons home and start your own colony with your own house. And the hope is that I will then take the houses, refurbish them, and lend them out to a new set of community mason bee people. That is the theory. We'll see how it goes. So that was just a brief explanation of the lending program. At the end of this lecture, when you log off, you will see a survey, and I'd love for you to fill it out. And if you're interested in borrowing one of our houses, there's a place where you can put your email, and I will send you an email with all the instructions when to pick up and whatnot. And please, even if you're joining us from Gambier Island or the interior, please stay in touch, because hopefully you will take this project on and commit to some mason bees in your backyard. Again, I'll send you some of my favorite suppliers that you can order things through the mail. They're excellent, very fast. I'd love you to send me pictures, stories, questions, and get a sense of what's happening in the province. And we can share some of our successes and failures, and I think that'll be a lot of fun. There is my name and my email. And what do you do with the cocoons? What I'm going to do right now, guys, is I'm going to turn off my screen share. And I'm going to ask if there's any short questions out there, just so we can have a bit of break from staring at the screen. Then I'm going to do a short just a short kind of take apart some tubes and we can look at them. And then if anyone wants to stick around, we're at 8 o'clock right now. You can ask me some more. So what do you do with the cocoons? Fran, can you give me a bit more on that one? Okay, so here is the mason bee house, and shout out to my dad who made these. It was his volunteer project for the year. He made all of these with a piece of PVC pipe. This is a linseeded oiled piece of cedar. And then you'll notice there's an amazing little container in the center of each of these houses that will be filled with 10 or 15 mason bee cocoons, okay? Has an exit hole, and you'll find it in the center. And I've provided enough housing for your first year of the reeds. You'll notice lots of coverage for rain and moisture. And if for some reason you're in a condo or something and you can't affix this to a screw, because I know some strata councils, you can actually lay this on a shelf and you can turn this around to provide a bit more coverage. You can also create some sort of coverage for it if it's getting any rain. So we thought of that too. I hope that answers your question, Fran. The cocoons will be inside, and in several weeks, the males will start hatching. They'll hang around the house. Shortly after, the females will hatch from this container. There will be a fury of mating, and she will start laying in these reeds. I can't absolutely promise they won't leave, but this is such a beautiful house. Why wouldn't you want to live in there, right? I will also show you, again, one of my dad's creations. We made these for the library. We're going to install one on our rooftop garden. So we're going to do that in the next 2 weeks. Again, lots of coverage, lots of rain protection. And then we're also going to put 2 on our story house balcony for this year. I also wanted to show you, this is an insert from my bee tree on the story house balcony. This is the other method I was talking about. So in each of these tubes is a cardboard liner first, provides a bit more protection. And then inside each cardboard is a straw. And look, we're getting, I do have to trim the straw a bit, but we are getting maximum length with that method. Oh, and I just wanted to show you, this is what the reeds look like, and you can buy them in bundles of like 25 and 50 from different suppliers. Again, I'll send you that name. What's great is that they are all come with a node. It is a grass similar to bamboo. So there is a node, so she doesn't have to provide that back end, and a variety of shapes and sizes and hole diameters for her to choose from. So let me just back up here. Thank you. People are saying, okay, so how do you wash the tubes? Colleen, I've decided tonight not to focus on the cleaning because it's a whole other thing. However, I will be emailing you a resource guide that explains that. You can also find a lot of them online. But my hope is that even if you aren't taking out one of these houses from our library, you are on a newsletter list that I hope to compile, and I will be sending you prompts. Remember to wash your bees, remember to put out things, and you can join us virtually for the cocoon washing program, which will happen next February. So watch for that. Someone has asked, I've heard about rolling paper tubes and putting an outer layer of foil around that helps with parasitic wasps. Have you tried this? I have never heard that. I have a feeling, you know what? Could a little parasitic wasp ovipositor get through there? I don't know. The foil just seems a little weird to me. I'm not crazy about just the permeability and airflow if this was wrapped in foil. I would prefer you to try and find a reed. You could give it a go. But no, I have never tried that. I've heard people trying to roll with parchment paper, newspaper. I would suggest just computer paper if you're going to roll your own straws. This is one of a house that I made someone out of recycled goods. And just goes to show that Dad and I have to relearn things because Dad drilled these holes and they took a paper liner, no cardboard, but this house got so wet that we had a heck of a time pulling those straws out of this slightly damp piece of wood. So again, if you're gonna use straws, make sure it is well out of the rain. Someone's asking if any library in Victoria has these bees houses available. Sadly, I don't think so. But again, these, be creative. Miramon, try and find some sort of plastic container, PVC pipe, a Coke bottle, a milk jug, put some reeds in it, protect it from the weather, and you might have success. Anita is asking again about the cocoons, and why don't we open some reeds, and then I'll just talk briefly to those who want to stick around at the end. How about that? And how do you know if the cocoon is a male or female? Excellent question. And I'm going to have to open one of these to show you, but the males are always smaller and the females are always larger. And when I open one of these, you will definitely see a size difference. Is it still too early to put out the cocoons? Now is the time, people. Now is the time. I will admit, after just telling you all, that I don't keep bees in the fridge, but because I wanted to hold these back and I wanted to make sure no one hatched for the purpose of showing them to you tonight, I did keep them in the fridge for a couple of days. A couple of days is okay. And that was the box was well ventilated. But yes, please put your cocoons out right now. What kind of straw? Someone is asking. Make sure it is paper. Never use a plastic straw. Sometimes you can even find these straws. They are called, not slushy straws, milkshake straws, because they are thicker. Sometimes you can find them in grocery stores. But again, I would suggest buying them from either a nature store. Wild Birds carry some products if you have one of those near you, or the site that I will send you later. Just never use plastic. How many tubes do you need for each female? Could you have several families in one house, and are they territorial? Great questions, Jane. How many tubes do you need for each female? As I mentioned, she lays 15, these are averages, by the way, people. She lays 15 eggs in her lifetime. I have seen books that say it's 30 to 40, but I recently double checked that with someone at Penn State University, and she is saying it's closer to 15. They're gonna average 5 babies per tube. It's gonna vary, sometimes 6, sometimes 7, but on average. So one female, we can estimate she is going to use 3 of these tubes. Sometimes she will use 3 tubes really close together. Sometimes she will use tubes in completely different houses. And yes, you can definitely have several females in one house. As I mentioned, they love to aggregate together, but they don't work in tandem. So you could have one female per each of these holes in some cases. And are they territorial? Absolutely not. Now, when I say that, she will definitely mark that as hers, but she doesn't defend it in the way like a social insect does. Sometimes we'll see females enter, and then another female who's already in there will push her out. That's about as territorial as they get. They aren't protecting any resources that she finds particularly useful. They're all for her offspring. So she doesn't need to protect this like a honeybee hive, where those workers are protecting the queen and the offspring and the food source. So again, that's why there's so much fun to work with. I hope that answers your questions, Jane. Do you have to open the tubes and wash the cocoons, or do they emerge naturally? Fran, excellent question, thank you. Okay, so it's true that you could just have fun with this house and do very little to it. You could put up something like this one and probably have success for 1 or 2 years. not washing it, not touching it, not anything. But after about 2 years, there's going to be so much debris in there, and they will occasionally reuse a tube if it's not too mucked up with pollen mites. She may go in there and push the debris out. But by your second, definitely by your third, this is going to be so full of frass and poop and mud and pollen mites that no one's going to use it. And then it's just providing kind of havoc for any mason bee that's going to be attracted to this, okay? They not emerge naturally? Yes, they absolutely do, because they've been doing this for millions of years. But again, this is about us committing to, if we're going to play with these and manage these and ask them to aggregate in a large number together, I really hope that you all out there now with this information, you will really get excited about playing with them and investigating what's in the tubes. But Fran, yes, you could just put it out and have fun watching them. And in 2 years, discard this and buy a new house, by all means. Yeah. So Taren, if we have a chalet style house, which came with cardboard tubes, can we just put it outside now and hope the cocoons come? Yes, so the cocoons are not coming because they don't have legs. But yes, mason bees most likely will come. And now that you know exactly where to put your chalet style house, morning sun, south facing, out of the wind and rain, you will probably, oh, and that's Sue. Hi, Sue. She was my previous supervisor here at the library. Yes, you will probably have success. And Sue, I forgot to mention, those of you that might be like Sue, who has a house, but is worried about if any bees are going to show up, I have extra bees here at the library. So please contact me and you can come and pick up a little container of them. So that's another option, because my good friend Patty, who lives in Lynn Valley, donated a whole bunch to the library. So that's another option. If you can get to us to pick them up, I would welcome you to come and get some free cocoons. So that looks like it for the end of questions. We have 15 minutes before the end. I thought we'll do just a quick little opening of some tubes, and I'll also talk a bit more about, since we have time, about how to wash them. You can all see that. So again, got the paper straws that go in the cardboard liners. And then we have the reeds. And then we have all of these. So these are from our story house upstairs. And this is something we've been washing bees, my mom and I, since January. And you'll notice there's that little mud plug I spoke of. So cute. There it is. Mud plug. And already we are encountering some Houdini fly larvae, because they were quite prevalent on the story house balcony. So, and I don't know if you can see all these little dots right here, but those are Houdini fly larvae. I hate these things. Mom, I'll bring them home for you and you can feed them to the birds, okay? Let's skip the paper tubes, because what I really want to show you is the reeds. And I know that this is the end with the plug. What's kind of cool about these reeds is that the female always leaves a space at the front. Oh, and Jane's asked, are you unwrapping a paper straw or a paper liner? I keep intermixing those two words. They are the same thing in my mind. So this is a cardboard tube, very thick, and I place a straw paper liner inside. Sorry about that. But let's focus on the reeds. So what you do is you just crush the very front. Don't crush the whole thing because there are babies in there. And then you just snap it open. Pretty cool. Okay. And I know the light isn't great, guys, sorry. There we go. Can you see that there are partitions and there are babies? So There was an empty hole, an empty vestibule at the front and a mud wall. And then there is a baby. And I can guarantee that that is a boy. Okay, and we're going to put him right there because you're going to see the size difference in a minute. Then, and these are incredibly, I've opened enough of these to know that these are incredibly clean bees, very few pollen mites. And they're really in there. So that one, telling by its size, hard to say, could be a male or a female. I don't know if you can see the size difference, but there you go. And Sean is asking, are there any pests present? Yes, Sean, in that first one, in the paper straw that I just opened, definitely Houdini fly larva. But this one I'm opening is gorgeous. And they're incredibly tough little cocoons. So we have a male and maybe 3 females. And this guy's really stuck at the back. So I'm gonna wait and take that one out in a bit. But this one is a nice, see that nice mud plug at the front? And look at the size difference. She has chosen a much bigger tube, but she was happy with that. So we're gonna just crush the end. Open it. Oh, this is gorgeous. And you know, I was saying that they average 5 babies. Well, this is not an average. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we have some pollen mites at the end. You see there's just kind of a fuzzy mass. Those are the pollen mites. So this is another reason it's so important to clean these guys. If there had been a female at the very back, she would have had to climb through all this debris. She would have become laden with that material and she would have had trouble flying. I know that this washing and opening tubes can seem a bit daunting, but I will send you resources. I'm here if you have any questions. We will go through the washing procedure next February. Anyone is welcome to join. I will make it a hybrid program, so you can join us from afar. Wow, I'm sold on the reeds. Thanks, Sean. I've had nothing but problems with paper, cardboard, and other liners. I completely agree. I did a little pilot project, sent a bunch of my colleagues home with houses, thought I knew it all, told them to put it out. Half of them came home so wet, I couldn't pull the paper liners out. And this is a house that I've had sitting in our basement. It got moist, and you see all these ones with the little crinkled white pieces of paper? I still can't get them out. There are ways you can get the bees out, but most likely no one hatched. They were stuck in there. So I highly, highly recommend these reeds. You can see, and I will, I'll just continue on here because someone asked about the cleaning. So that little guy at the front is definitely a male. See, now we got the, and then this one is probably a male as well. And then we look like that we have a female. I hope you can see the size differences. A lot of the research going on at university, especially Penn State, when I've been not working with one-on-one, just listening and reading their research, actually uses X-rays to look inside the cocoons and can tell the different, what's going on and if anything has parasitized it. There's some really cool photos online that you can find. So where do we buy these reeds? Kathy, I will send everyone an email. I am not affiliated with the company, but they have been excellent at sending stuff to me. So if you don't clean out the cocoons, does that impact the number and can they hatch by themselves? Does it impact the number? No. In your first year, you're probably going to have a really nice, clean set of offspring, and they're going to do what nature intended, and they're going to climb out of here. But like I said, if you have a female at the back here that gets behind a pollen mite infested cell, she's going to have to climb through all of that, and it's not going to be optimal. She's probably going to die or not be able to fly by the time she gets to the end. But they've been doing this for millions of years. They've figured it out, and they'll do the best they can. Nature works in mysterious ways. Now, what are we going to do with the cocoons? Thank you, Marguerite. Okay. I didn't bring any of my washing stuff, but what I would do is I'd get a bowl of water, cold water, and a strainer, and I would submerge all of these cocoons right in the water. And they are very resilient. Obviously, I'm not going to squish them, but they are impervious to water. And I'm going to put them in the strainer and kind of jiggle them so that there's an abrasive, the cocoons rub against the strainer. And you're going to notice all sorts of things fall to the bottom of the bowl. There's going to be frass and pollen and poop, and mites are going to start floating around, very, very tiny mites. They do not hurt you at all. They're of no concern health-wise. And you're going to get them really wet. You could even put them under the faucet, cold water only, agitate them. And then you're just going to lay these on a piece of paper towel, kind of spread them out and let them dry for, 10 minutes, okay? Then you're going to find a container, a little box, or this fabulous container my dad made, and you're just gonna put them all in there. Make sure that you make a large enough hole with no, with no abrasive surfaces. I would probably wring that out a bit just so their wings don't get stuck on anything. And this is ready to then, if you had, just this house, you could tie it, tape it to the side. And the hope is that the bees are going to leave the container and fly into your provided house. Like I said, this one that we're lending out has it right in the middle. And I just try to stay away from dark materials because it's going to, the sun will make it too hot. If you use plastic, make sure there's lots of breathing room in there. Make sure that rats and critters can't get at your babies because they will go for them. Try and keep everything dry. I hope those answers those questions. And yes, Karen, they are extremely hardy. I can't even cut through a cocoon with like scissors or an X-Acto knife. They can chew out from inside, but it's amazing. They will float in the water. If any of them sink, it means it's been compromised. So you can just throw it away. And since we are entering mason bee season, and just like my mom said, the males are getting the cues, both the temperature cues and the light cues, that it is time to hatch. So they are going to start chewing out of their cocoons, even if given about 2 hours of, room temperature. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of these cocoons before me right now, if I didn't put them back in the fridge in the next hour, they will start hatching. Do you need to use paper liners inside the cardboard straws, or can you just use paper liners or cardboard straws on their own? Many thanks. Yes. The cardboard comes in a variety of widths. I didn't bring all the different widths, but the supplier I am going to send you with in an email has some that are more resilient to water and are thicker. Now, these are incredibly hard to unravel. So that is why I suggest getting these fabulous straws. They almost have like it's not a wax, but they're really hardy. It's better than your basic soda straw. And then you just insert them in there. Then you can reuse cardboard year after year, as long as it doesn't become overly moist, and you just pull out the straw. You will find some suppliers that sell a thinner cardboard tube, but I find it's not unlike a paper straw. So I'd recommend the combo. And then I'd recommend if the cardboard liner combo inside of a wood substrate. Would be my preference if you didn't want to go the reed route. I hope that answers that question. Beverly, can I use small bamboo? I have experimented with bamboo, and yes, by all means, give it a go. Just harder to open if you wanted to clean it. I had to use, like, if this was the bamboo, I had to get a chisel and put it there and then give it a whack. And I was worried that I was going to hurt those babies. But yes, people have used bamboo. And to me, it seems like a material not unlike this reed. I don't think it breathes quite as well. I mean, bamboo is incredibly strong building material. So you could give it a go. But yeah, and let me know how it goes. And Jess, I'm sure you've said this, but how do we borrow the houses from the library? I will send everyone an email. There will be a survey prompt as well at the end of this lecture when I hit goodbye that will ask you to put in your email and name, and I will get in contact with you. You also all have my email address. If anything goes wrong, by all means, send me an email. We have, I think, enough people that are interested. If for some reason we don't, we'll do it on a lottery system, and then I'll help you as best I can to get you all the resources you need. Looks like lots of people were able to join us tonight and ask questions. Someone says, look forward to hatching the mason bees. Thank you. You're very welcome. I'll send out this email to everyone tomorrow, all the resources I mentioned, and I hope you just have fun with mason bees, because I know I have. Every year I learn something new. Every year is a new experience. And I think that's all for tonight. So enjoy bees, enjoy nature, enjoy our spring, and don't hesitate to email me with anything. Thanks for joining me. Come on by to the West Vancouver Memorial Library. Look at the bee tree up on the Story House balcony. We'd be happy to show it to you. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye now.